Now in this section, we'll explore commands that will allow us to display important information about the system, the memory usage information, the file system disk space usage, how to exit the terminal, and how to shut down the system. Right now, I will not go through all of the commands. Right, we'll go through uname, free, and df, which will display information about the system, the memory free used swap memory in the system, and the file system disk space usage. I'll not be running shutdown, and we already explored sudo before the file compression section. Using exit, you can exit the terminal, right? It is similar to quit that we have in R. Right, so we'll go through uname first, right? It is a command that is used to view important information about the system, right? So I'll run it has several options that can be used along with that, but I'll just run uname with the A option so that it will print all the available information system. So this is just to know, just in case you want to know the underlying hardware related information, or the like the machine and processor, or the software related information like operating system, release number and version, etc. Right, so let us run uname A here, and then you can see the operating system is Linux, you have the username, and then you have the date, time, then you have the machine information as well. So run the free command, which will display free used swap memory in the system, right? And the df command, which will display file system disk space usage. Right, so this is just so that you know how to look at all this information. You may not really need them, but it's always good to know, right? So there are a few other commands that you can look at if you want to get more information about the system, or if you're looking at system management, right? And what we'll do is we'll go to the next section now, where we'll learn a few more commands that are useful, right? The time command, you'll see how long a command takes to execute, right? So for example, I'm going to write time ls, right? It shows the time taken for this command to execute. The sleep command will delay activity, right? So if I say sleep 5, it will suspend activity for 5 seconds, right? So you don't see the prompt immediately, you'll see it after 5 seconds. If you want to do it in minutes or hours, then you will have to run something like this. It's for 1 minute, you can use 1m. It's for 1 hour, you can use 1h, right? And if you want to see the history, that is of the commands that we have run, the command list history, then use the history command, right? It will show you all the commands that we have run so far in the course itself, right? And if you want to clear the command history list, you can use history along with the C option, right? So this will clear the command history list. Right now, I'll not run it. I would prefer to keep the command history list. And in R, you can use sys.sleep to delay activity, and you can also use history function to look at all the commands that you have run, or all the functions that you have executed. Now there are a few keyboard shortcuts, right? Control C will halt the current command, right? We use it downloading files from log files from RStudio and Mirror, right? We interrupted the download using Control C. Control D is for exiting the terminal. Control W will erase one word in the current line. Control U will erase the whole line, and Control R will bring up a recent command. Right, so these are some of the important keyboard shortcuts. You can keep them in mind. And then there are a few funny commands, right? Fortune, yes, banner, and rev, right? So you can try this. Some of them you'll have to install those packages, which means you will need the super user or root user privileges, right? Others will just work. I think yes and rev should work. Fortune and banner will require you to install those packages using the sudo command, right? Let me see if we can run some of them, right? Yes, I love bash, right? It'll just go on printing I love bash on the terminal, right? So use Control C to stop it. Right, so we use Control C to stop it. And right, so you can try some of these commands. Just ensure that you have the super user or root user privileges. Right now, we will move out of the command line or the terminal for the time being, and we'll start running some of these commands that we have learned, that are shell commands, from R, right? So we'll move into the next section where we'll use the system2 function in R to execute shell commands from R, right? So we'll learn how to execute a command without any of the options, execute command with options, and finally redirect output to the file or our console, right? So let us start with this, right? So far we have been spending all our time in the terminal, and we have been exploring shell commands. Now let us get back to R and execute some of those commands that we have learned from the R console, right? So let us move this here, okay, and let us run clear, and here we will run the system2 function, right? So first let us try to execute a command without any additional options, right? So I'll execute the ls command, which will list all the files and directories in the bash tutorial directory, right? So I'll use system2 function, and the command is ls, right? Let us run this. Okay, so here you can see all the files and directories that are present in the current working directory, which is bash tutorial, right? So we used to do it here in the terminal ls. Now we are doing the same from R using the system2 function. We specified the command as ls, right? So now you know how to execute a command without any additional options, right? We're just listing the files and folders. So we did this. Now what do we do when you have to specify an additional option, right? For example, here if I want to run ls minus a or ls minus l, then how does it work, right? So let us try that here. So we go to system2, the command is still ls, and when we have to specify additional details, right, what we do is we'll use the args argument, and we'll supply a character vector here, right? And here I'll mention the option that we are using, right? So we'll run this, right? So now you can see it is listing the files and directories one per line, right? This is the same as this command we have, right? ls and l for listing files and directories, one per line, right? So now you know how to specify the additional options, right? You will use the args argument and you will supply a character vector where each element will be the additional option or the values that we have to supply. Right now, how do we redirect the output, right? Let us say we are writing a message to a file using the echo command, right? We tried that in a example, right, where we did that echo and then followed by one of the R release names, which was action of the toes or great truth, and we wrote that to a file called release.txt, right? And we redirected the output. Instead of printing it to the terminal, we redirected the output to release.txt, right? So here you have this release.txt file, right? Now what I'll do is I'll remove this one, right? Release.txt, it is gone. Okay, now we'll do the same from the R function. So I have system2 command is echo, right? The value that it has to print to the terminal is great truth, and it has to redirect the output to this file, right? Release.txt, right? Instead of printing great truth to the terminal, it has to write it to this file release.txt. Let us run this, right? It has run. Now let us go to the terminal and see here, right? So release.txt is here, it has been created, right? And you can see that it has the string great truth, right? That is what we did here. Now let us run the cat command here. Let us see how it works. System2, the command is cat, and the additional value that we are providing here is release.txt, right? I want cat to read the contents of that file and print it, right? So here you can see it has printed great truth. Now I can also use this std out argument and set it to true and see what happens, right? Now you can see it has returned a character vector, right? It has returned a character vector to the R console. So in some cases you'll have to use this standard out and set it to true if you want the output to be redirected to the R console. It will not do it in all cases. Remember, it will not redirect the output to the R console in all cases, in all the commands. So in those cases you will have to use the std out argument and set it to true so that the output is redirected to the R console. Okay, now what else do we explore, right? Let us try a diff command, right? Let us run one of the diff commands and see what happens, right? So system2 command is diff, and the additional values are the names of the files, right? Which is import underscore olsrr.text and imports underscore blur.txt. Let us run this. Right here you can see the output, right? That is the difference between the files, and what should you change to make these files identical, right? So you can use the system2 function in R, and then you can execute shell commands from that function. So keep in mind how you will specify the additional options and the values that are supplied, and how you can redirect output to the R console or to a separate file, right? So we did that with release.txt, where we redirected the output to a file. And if you use the true value, which is if you set the value of std out to true, the output will be redirected to the R console, right? Now let us try one more thing. We have the bash.sh file here, right? And let us see if we can execute commands from this file, right? I'll open it here, and if I run it here, you can bring the cursor to the command, and then you can click on run, right? So since it knows that this is a shell script, right, you can see that here, right? It knows this is a shell script. So when you run the command, instead of sending it to the R console, it will send it to the terminal, right? And you can also execute it by pressing Control Enter, right? So either click on run, or you press Control Enter, and the command will get executed. And what about RMarkdown, right? Let us create a new RMarkdown file here. Right, and I will just execute a few shell commands here. Okay, the most important thing is to use the bash or sh engine instead of R, right? So you have to specify bash here, and I'll call it C1, right? And you can run the command here, right? We'll try to list the files. Let me save this, save it as bash, right? So it becomes bash.rmd, and when we knit this document, it should be able to execute the ls command, because here we have changed the engine to bash instead of keeping it as R. And if you don't have bash, that is if you are on Windows and if you have not installed the Windows subsystem for Linux, then you will have to specify this as sh instead of bash, right? Then it will send the command to the command prompt, and it will execute it using the command prompt, right? So let us see the document here in viewer, right? So you can see it has executed ls, and you can see all the files and directories that we have here, right? So you now know how to execute shell commands from R using system2, right? And you can also try out the processx package, which has a run function, right? So you can use the run function, and you should be able to execute shell commands from that function as well. You know how to run these shell commands from a shell script, right? Either use run or Control Enter, and it will be sent to the terminal instead of R console. And you also know how to execute shell commands in a RMarkdown document, right? instead of using the R engine, you will use either bash or sh. Now, so we have executed shell commands in RStudio terminal. We learned how to execute them from R using the system2 function, and we also saw how to execute these shell commands in RMarkdown, right? So one thing that is left is to execute R scripts, right, from the shell, right? From the terminal, I want to run R functions and R scripts, right? And for that, I will not use bash, because I'm using the Windows subsystem for Linux, right? And I have not installed R uh, uh, here in bash. So what I'll do is, for this last part of the course, I will change it into command prompt, right? Instead of using bash or Windows subsystem for Linux, I will use the command prompt, because I have R installed in my system, in the Windows system, and I have modified the path variable, right? Using environment variables, I have added R to the path variable. So now I should be able to run R in the command prompt, and I should also be able to execute R code as well as R script, right? So I'll start a new terminal. Now that should not be using bash, right? It should instead use the command prompt. Okay, so let me see if I run R, will it start R here, right? Okay, so within RStudio now I also have R running in the terminal, right? And I am using command prompt and not bash for this part, right? So now I can run some functions, right? I'll do head empty cars, right? So I'll just close this out here. We'll continue to use the terminal for the rest of the course, right? So if I run R, it will start R in the terminal, and if I want run some R functions directly, right, I have to exit R here. So I'll use quit. No, don't say the workspace image. I am back to the command prompt now, and here I will run the R functions, right? So I have R expressions. So you have head empty cars, and the next one separated by a semicolon is summary empty cars, right? So first it will launch R, okay, and then it will run both these functions, right? So you can see that it has launched R here, right? And then it ran head empty cars first, and then followed by summary empty car. So if you want to do it in this way, you can use R followed by E for specifying R expressions, right? E option allows us to specify R expressions. Now another way to run the R code in the terminal is to use R script, right? Again I will use E so that I can specify R expression, and this time run summary empty cars, right? And you can see that it doesn't actually start R in the command line, right? It's just displaying the results of summary empty cars. So that's the difference between R and R script. R will first launch R, and then it will run those functions that we have specified, that is those expressions that we have specified within the codes. In case of R script, it doesn't launch R as such, it will just redirect the result of that expression to the terminal, right? Here you don't see R in the terminal here, right? And what about a script, right? Here I'm specifying an expression, right? What if I want to execute a script, right? Now here we have a script called analysis dot R, right? And it has a R function, right? Head empty cars. Now let us see how to execute this script, right? R script and analysis.r, right? So you can again see the output here, right? It has executed head empty cars and redirected the output to the terminal, right? So use R followed by the E option and then specify the expressions or R code within the quotes, and each function must be separated by a semicolon. That will launch R and then execute those expressions or functions. Otherwise you can use R script again followed by the E option, specify the expressions. It will not launch R, it will execute those expressions and redirect the output to the terminal. Or if you have those R functions in a script, that is in a R file, then you can use R script and execute the file by specifying the file name, right? So these are the different ways in which you can run R code in the terminal, right? So that brings us to the end of all the main sections. Right now, a few things that we have not covered, right? I would like to highlight those things. So we have still not covered shell scripting, how to edit files, about file permissions, right? We have not looked at file permissions, user information. We have not looked at pipes or set, right? So some of the topics that we have not covered, and but we have added references and further readings where you can read about all these topics, right? Now let me come to the summary before we end. So again, shell is a text-based application for viewing, handling and manipulating files. It's also known as command line, terminal or the bash, and it's useful in several scenarios. But from the perspective of the course, we wanted to learn enough to be able to use it for version control and cloud services. Now RStudio includes a terminal from version 1.1.383, so that's what we use throughout the course. You can use system2 to execute shell commands in R, and you can execute commands from the shell script in RStudio using either the run button or control enter, and you can execute R code and R scripts from the command line using R or R script, right? And you can also execute shell commands in RMarkdown using the bash or sh engine, right? Now that brings us to the end of the course. Here are a few references, right? You can go through all of this. We have referred to these as well. It includes those R packages that we have mentioned, right? The functions which we map to the shell commands, the RStudio webinar, RStudio blog post about the RStudio terminal, right? You can go through that as well. And so that brings us to the end of this course. We hope you enjoyed it and you liked it. Please do send us your feedback to support@rsquaredacademy.com, and you can tell what you liked, what you did not like about the course, how can we improve the courses that we are creating, and any other suggestion, right, regarding the courses or regarding our R packages, Shiny apps, our blog, our video tutorials. Any of these you can send your feedback, suggestions, or if you find any errors, right? If you find there are any errors in the content, please bring them to our notice so that we can fix those errors. So again, let me wish you all the best in learning the command line, and we hope you will find this course beneficial, and you will learn a lot from this course, and you will continue to learn more and more about data science. Thank you.